Hi, today we are in Campbell at Skyhigh. Hi Rajiv, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Martin. So I'm an entrepreneur by choice, technology by training, and I am formerly the CEO of Skyhigh, but more interestingly, I'm one of the team members at Skyhigh.
Great, awesome. What did you do before Skyhigh and what made you come up with the business idea?
So prior to Skyhigh, I was running a business unit at Cisco, and as I mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur by choice. I got into Cisco because I acquired my previous company. So that's how I was at Cisco running a business unit at BBGM there. The idea for Skyhigh actually is very old, and I'll date myself. So as a fresh PhD in '91, I just graduated from Caltech and joined HP Labs. My day job was designing the HP Intel microprocessor, but I had an epiphany, an idea that all computing, storage, applications, networking would one day be available as a utility. You plug it in the wall, you dial an SLA, and a broker would make it available to you. Now, remember at the time, you won't remember, you're too young, but in '91, the common technology consideration was client-server, right? So you have a client and you have servers. But I said, no, it's not going to be a service, it's going to be a utility. So I didn't call it cloud, but the same idea is that you plug into something and then compute happens somewhere, storage happens somewhere, networking happens somewhere, and all you get is the byproduct, the end product, what you need, was what I had thought of working in '91. Again, I was 25 years a little too early, but that's the genesis of what we're doing today at Skyhigh.
Great. So what is Skyhigh?
So Skyhigh is the intent of Skyhigh is to take this disruption called cloud. All analysts call cloud computing as a big disruption. In fact, they say it's as disruptive as the PC was 25 years ago. And to take this disruption called cloud, and as all disruptions are, they can be good and bad, is to make sure that enterprises benefit from the promise of cloud and not get hurt from the perils of cloud. And so there are things like, how do I make sure that my data is secure? How do I make sure that I can govern the use of cloud? How do I make sure I maintain my privacy? How can I make sure it's compliant? Because all of those things are required for enterprises to be able to leverage cloud. So that's our focus. In a different sense, again, if you take a step back and put it in perspective, just like the PCs or the devices, they created the need for a governance and control point. And Symantec and McAfee and others stepped in, and they were helping control the data on the device. And then we as an industry connect these devices together, and the internet came along, and there was the inside of the enterprise and the outside of the enterprise. And we then created this kind of a layer of controlling, governing the data inside the enterprise versus outside. And Cisco and Checkpoint and Palo Alto Networks and Blue Coat and others came along and created that control point for the internet. We think that the same movement is now moving to the cloud, where I want my data to be used for collaboration purposes. When my employees are mobile and they're using their own devices, a BYOD environment, where they're trying to use this data to get their job done, where my partners are connecting with the data I've made available to them, my customers are running in a cloud service, because it's much more efficient that way than trying to run in my on-premise data centers. And that same movement of liberation, of collaboration, requires another control point. And that's what we're trying to create at Skyhigh, is to create the next generation control point for the data. So as Symantec was for the PC, as Cisco was for the network, there's a need for a control point for the data that's moving to cloud, and that's what we're trying to create at Skyhigh.
Great. Rajiv, once the idea for Skyhigh grew for more than 20 years, what was actually the point when you started it, and what was it like in the first 3 to 6 months? So when did you find the first employees? When did you work on the product? When did you raise money?
Yeah, so very good question. So I obviously wanted to work on this, what I call client utility, call it cloud, whatever, for many, many years. But when I was working at Cisco running this business unit, obviously my day job was doing that. And once my team, and I've been fortunate, by the way, across everything I've done, I've been fortunate to work with some very, very good folks. And that's why I call myself, with pride, as I'm a team player. I'm one of the team at Skyhigh, right? That to me is the biggest pride I can take. So once my team at Cisco, they delivered a product that won the Pioneer Award in Cisco, which is a very coveted award. Essentially, only products that are game changing from a Cisco perspective win that award, and this team won it. The product won it. At that time, I decided, okay, now maybe it's time to go back to my roots and do something entrepreneurial again outside of a big company.
Yeah.
And even though I thought and had this love affair with what we were calling cloud for a long time, I didn't want to go and marry the first girl I met, right? So with my two co-founders, what I said was, okay, let's figure out what the industry needs. And let's come up with 5 different game-changing ideas, different ones. Mm-hmm. And then let's choose the best and go with it. Because I didn't want to bias it and just do cloud. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we spoke with about 140 different IT executives in the industry. So CIOs, CEOs, CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, infrastructure folks, IT leaders, and asked them, so what are some of the issues that you see coming down the pike that you need addressed? Mm-hmm. And they said, storage came up again and again. The cost of storage is going up. Mobility came up. Security came up. And cloud came up a number of times. And then the 5th one kept changing, identity, different things. And so what we did was we built up, as I mentioned, we built up sort of mini business plans. Not a full-fledged MBA, but what's the market, size of market, route to market, competition, what are the key trends in the industry we're going to be working with, and so on and so forth. And then based on that analysis, we chose this particular one because we thought that this was the biggest need, fastest growing, and none of the existing incumbents were addressing it adequately. So that's how we came up with the idea, which was essentially, like I said, the rebirth of an idea that was more than 25 years ago before that. Or at least a different, today's version of what we had thought, some of us thought of 25 years ago.
And how long did it take you to validate this idea and choose the right one for the trend?
That process took us a couple of months, maybe 3 months or so. And then what we did was, so then we left Cisco, my co-founders at Cisco as well, we left Cisco on very good terms. So very, very good terms. Cisco is a customer, a partner, our advocates. And so when we left Cisco was when we then decided, okay, so now we have the idea of what we want to do, but we wanted to make sure that we mapped into how to take it to the customers equally well before we wrote any code. Mm-hmm. So what we did was, and very much like the lean startup, right, the outside-in approach, we created mock-ups, no line of code, just mock-ups, and went back to those 140 people and said, hey, we understood your problem. If we addressed it this particular way, is this what you had in mind? And some of them said yes, some of them said no. And then we iterated on that. And then when we showed them when they said, yes, that's it, that became my PRD, my product requirement document. Because essentially I could tell my team, build this, because that's how my customers see it, that's how they want it. And that was very effective for us. That worked very well for us. Because what happens is, most startups, the issue they have is, you start off with a technology base. And especially when startups are founded by technologists, they get enamored with the technology, right? They say, okay, this is technology, where can I apply it? But this is completely different. This was an outside-in approach. So we wanted to make sure that the need as the customers saw it was manifest in what we were showing them. And that became the PRD as I described. And that's why the team built it very quickly. That's why we have today more than 500 of the world's largest enterprises, some of the biggest companies in every vertical industry using Skyhigh to help them with their cloud adoption. And we had very few of those experiences that startups had where they turn left and they turn right, turn left, because they hadn't, in many cases after they create the product is when they get the feedback, and that's when they learn. We did that early on, and that was very effective for us. So back to your question, it took us a couple of months, maybe 3 months or so, to kind of get that kind of industry feedback, to decide which particular area we wanted to focus on. It took us about, I would say, 4 or 5 months to do that mock-ups and get the feedback and sort of hone it into what it wanted to be. And then it became a much easier task in terms of even recruiting people, because when to engineers, we would say, rather than sort of giving them a very big description, we'd say, this is what we're trying to do. And for a lot of engineers, that specificity is also very helpful, right? And that helped us significantly. Yeah.
What was the sequence? So did you first build the product and try to sell it to the customers, get some cash, and then maybe try to bootstrap, and then only after, once you have traction, raise the money? Yeah. Or did you raise the money first and then went to customers?
Yeah, good question. So, and I think given my experience, the fact that, my co-founders and I have been around the block a few times. This is my third startup. We did it slightly differently than what I think a lot of entrepreneurs should do. But I'll tell you my experience, and I'll tell you what I expect entrepreneurs to do. So in what we did was when I left Cisco, when we left Cisco, the three of us were all at Cisco, we had Greylock ready to fund us the day we left. Because Ashim Chand at Greylock was the lead investor in my previous company, the one Cisco acquired. And the relationship with him and with Greylock was very, very good, just outstanding. And so I had told him earlier, which entrepreneurs typically shouldn't do. It's not a good idea because it takes away our leverage. I told him that based on how well we worked on together, anything I do next, you have first dibs, you have the first rights. Just make sure it's fair. And so I went to him and said, this is what I'm going to do. He said, that sounds great. Let me take it to the partnership. The partnership said, go for it. And so there was a very, very short cycle. But I think part of the short cycle was because, as I said, we paid our dues and sort of we had the experience working with Greylock. For most entrepreneurs, they don't have that luxury or they don't have that benefit. So maybe it might be slightly different. But in our case, back to your question, was we had funding on day one when we started the company, which kind of makes it easy in some sense. But like I said, I think most entrepreneurs may have a different sequence that they would choose to use.
When I look at entrepreneurs nowadays and they raise tons of money, they seem to be sometimes having problems with focusing on being very lean.
That's right.
How did you focus?
No, that is so accurate. That is so accurate. In fact, that comment you made about being lean and being focused is highly relevant, almost independent of money. What I mean by that is I believe that startups who don't succeed, they don't succeed not because of starvation, they don't succeed because of indigestion. They try and eat too much, they try and do too much, and they don't do anything really well. And that's absolutely I think a big concern that any entrepreneur should have. So the way I think for us, the way we've kind of managed to stay focused is, now by the way, we have our own challenges as well. I mean, there's so many things we want to do. The space is so large, the opportunity is so big, our imaginations are so wild that there are so many things we want to do. So we have to keep ourselves in check. So yeah, it's not all roses. Let me grant you that. But I think that what's helped us is that homework we did earlier, right? Where we actually got all the feedback earlier from the customers, from the prospective customers. Based on that feedback, we defined some very important foundational principles. And those foundational principles have been sort of the bearings for what's kept us sort of focused. And those were seamless consumption, right? You're moving to the cloud. The reason why people are using the cloud today is because they can use it today, right? They don't have to worry about waiting for 9 months for IT to deliver something. Zero friction. So in today's day and age, people don't have the patience time for friction, right? You give them friction, they get around it. And the third one is because we are appealing to enterprises. In fact, our first 3 customers at Skyhigh were Cisco, and 2, I don't know whether I can publicly name their names or not, but one was a Fortune 10 company, and the other one was one of the top 5 banks in the world, right? So we start off with some very large customers.
Not too bad, right?
No, well, not too bad, but again, not wise either, right? Because normally as an entrepreneur, you start off something where you can make some mistakes, you can learn from mistakes. Right. Choosing the 3 sort of largest, Cisco probably the largest in networking, one of the largest in banking, one of the less, and so it was not particularly clever. It worked out well, but not advice I'd give anybody else, right? So anyway, so because our focus on enterprises, the third sort of foundational principle, remember that since I took a detour, I'll remind you, the first was seamless consumption, second was zero friction. Third one was make sure we leverage and extend what the enterprises already have. Because even though in theory, rip and replace works, in practice it's very difficult, right? Enterprises, they've spent a lot of time and money getting somewhere, they won't just throw everything out and start anew, right? So our focus is helped by doing that homework early on, as opposed to getting the market and then trying to figure it out. And the second is using that homework to come up with those foundational principles, and those principles have also kept us very focused and disciplined. And the third one is we do a pretty good job of taking customer feedback, very customer driven, and apply our own sort of imagination of where we think the world is headed. And the way we describe that is, and this may be a little subtle, but discerning want from need, right? That is, the customers can tell you, I want this, right? And they obviously want it. But to understand, when they say they want A, do they really need A, or they need A prime, right? And, for example, no customer would have told Steve Jobs that he wants an iPad, right? Or wants an iPhone, right? But Steve Jobs and team discern there's a need for it. So that subtlety between want and need is something that we've tried to formalize. No, I won't say formalize, but we at least very cognizant of. So we are very good listeners of our customers. They tell us what they want. We make sure to take a step back and say, so what is the real need? And then we focus on that.
So it seems to have taken out lots of risks in the beginning, so that you don't need to pivot that much, because
That's right.
you understand the pain points and
That's
then
right.
can work some kind of flexible solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Still, what have been the main challenges or obstacles that you perceived, although still that you took out this risk, and how did you react to that?
So we took out some risks. There's never a situation there's no risk, right? Then you typically have no return either. No, we took out some risks. We took out, I think, the market need risk, which is one of the most important risks that people take. We early on sort of addressed the product market fit risk, because we had this feedback before we even had the first line of code, and once we had the code, we were very, very customer focused. So we removed, or at least reduced that risk somewhat. Reduced the funding risk, because we have Greylock and Sequoia, arguably two of the top world's VCs. Also, we took the risk out because we wanted to create something game-changing, so not just a simple extension of something. And these two companies have backed such game-changing companies as Palo Alto Networks and LinkedIn and ServiceNow and such. So we want to keep that streak alive. We know they have the muscle memory, right, to do something big. And so we've taken out, at least reduced some of that risk as well. But lots of other risks that we have experienced, and we are experiencing still. One of them, ironically, is a risk that we didn't even realize we were taking, is one of scale. So even though we had this confidence of the industry needs this product we're creating, it is game changing, it's a control point, but we ourselves were a little surprised by how quickly customers have adopted it. Like, as I mentioned, we have more than 500 enterprises. For a startup company in the enterprise space, and again, our focus is large enterprises primarily. We have mid-sized companies as well, but my direct sales team is focused on large enterprises. To have that many enterprises at that scale, 400,000 employees, 320,000 employees, 270,000 employees, use it was a bit of a surprise to us. But luckily, as I said, we had 3 of the largest customers who helped define scale. But that's something that I think could have tripped us pretty badly if we weren't careful. Another risk that, again, you'll be surprised, because most of the entrepreneurs, they worry about, correctly so, about market risk, product market fit, funding risk, and so on and so forth. And maybe that's why this one comes out later, because those are the big ones, the long poles in the tent. But another sort of risk that, not risk, but opportunity, challenge, how we think about it, that we are facing today, that I know we'll continue facing, is that technology is changing very rapidly, right? So we have today, we had to, initially we didn't really think of this as much, but now we've learned from that. So today we have a platform where we anticipate that the underpinnings of the platform, whether I'm using Edge-based or Cloudera or whatever the case might be, that those may change over time. And I have to be prepared to change my engine while my plane is flying, right? So that can introduce risk as well. But thankfully, those are the kinds of risks, scale or technology risks, are the ones that are within our control in some sense, right? That's within the 4 walls of Skyhigh, that we can decide which one to adopt, which not to adopt. The biggest risks of any startup are the external risks, right? The market risk, product market fit risk. Those are the ones I think we've done a pretty good job of, because we took the time to think through it before we actually went and wrote the code or pivoted 3 times as many startups do.
Rajiv, you briefly touched the point on, if the technology changes, how should I change as my company? When I look at bigger companies, they started with some very crappy code just because it's cheaper,
right? And
they try to scale, and they see, oh, I've got a scaling problem here.
That's right.
Yeah. how do you address this? Are you putting some kind of resources besides, so you are decreasing technical debt, or is it that you're doing some kind of greenfield approach where you have a times of parallel platforms?
Actually, very insightful question. So you've done this before, because that's or at least spoken with folks who've done it before, because that's a very insightful question, and it's not an easy one to answer, right? Because creating a greenfield approach in parallel with your existing approach means your investment has to be not double, but obviously significant. Sometimes it also creates the problem, a cultural problem of today's technology was tomorrow's technology, and no one wants to be yesterday's technology. You know what I mean? So that creates a cultural problem as well, that you have to be very careful about. So what we have done is I think the biggest reason why we have been, in all humility, as successful as we have so far, it's not, and success isn't granted, it's going to change, and so on and so forth, but at least so far it looks like we've done reasonably well, is because of the people, right? It's the folks that we have, again, back to what I mentioned earlier, the team that we have at Skyhigh, and I say with pride and privilege that I'm part of the team, are the best in the industry. Best in their particular field, and the way we work together as a team is really what I think gives us our strength. And so the folks that we have here are ones who they know their domain really well, but they also have the mindset, similar mindset to what I described, that things change, right? So they all are tuned to change. They all are tuned to, hey, in my field, as a good example of my big data, or my analytics, or my high bandwidth, high frequency networking, whatever it is, they themselves have the mindset of what's the latest, what's changing that they can adopt, right? So I never have to. I've never felt the need to that this is my team that's doing today's technology. They may not be aware, or they may not be comfortable with tomorrow's technology. Have a separate team that's tomorrow's technology and leapfrog. We don't do that. Because I think that has many challenges, an investment challenge, but more investment I think is fine, because we have reasonable amount of money. But back to your point, sometimes too much money can create problems as well because you do the wrong things. So we've been careful to make sure that we don't use that the fact that we have very strong VCs to sort of take approaches which we think could be culturally a mistake, and I think is often a cultural mistake to have yesterday's team and tomorrow's team, and it creates a us versus them mentality. By the way, I know lots of big companies today have their what they call the internal competition, but I'm not sure that's the right thing for us to do.
Rajiv, when many people talk about the cloud, it sounds to me like, oh, there's one cloud and then you just take it up. But actually, it's more like, okay, there are several services which you can plug in, but I'm not aware of one kind of platform or middleware or whatsoever you would call it, where I can then really plug in. Do you see some kind of trend that there might be coming up one or two bigger platforms? When I look at Windows, for example, or Microsoft in general, they are trying to go into this kind of cloud sphere as an operating system or platform, basically the same. Do you perceive some kind of trends?
Actually, a very good question. So your first point about the cloud, that we talk of cloud as one entity, as one homogeneous entity. That's not the case at all. It's very heterogeneous and growing heterogeneous by the moment, right? So today we have more than 16,000 public cloud services in our registry, and growing at about 100 per week, right? It's expanding. And that entropy is not going to go away, right? Because it's so easy to create a cloud service that people do, and they should, and they will. And so that I don't think that's going to go away. So I think what you're describing is an issue of economies of scale. And so today you see Amazon, Microsoft, Google, maybe IBM, and maybe maybe two others who have the scale today in creating that infrastructure as a service, or platform as a service, that people can build their SaaS cloud service on top of. So yes, I think there is already some sort of scale-based consolidation, but I think that is at one level, but at the level above that, where people are using these platforms, they're using the infrastructures to create new cloud services, software as a service, SaaS services, I don't see that consolidating at all. And so another question is will a platform provider, like let's say Microsoft as an example, will Microsoft be a platform provider and be a SaaS provider with Office 365? Does that give them the right to be the control point for the cloud, for the generic cloud? And I think the answer is no. But I have a lot of respect for Microsoft, and Satya's done a fantastic job there. I think everybody admits it. I think the rule of the game is that if you're a SaaS company, you cannot be an honest broker between that SaaS company and other SaaS companies, right? It's almost like saying, I want to be the player and the referee at the same time, right? That doesn't happen. So I think there's going to be this need for this control point, which is going to be independent of any of the SaaS providers or in the platform providers, because there are many of those. So I feel pretty comfortable that this is not going to be subsumed by any of them. But if you go above that stack, I think because of economies of scale, there's going to be consolidation. There already are 5, maybe 6 players in terms of infrastructure. But go above that again, where people can create new business logic, new SaaS, that I don't think there's going to consolidate anytime soon. Okay. If anything, it's growing wider.
Rajiv, you've started three companies. You've learned a lot. So what type of learnings can you share with other people interested in starting a company?
Yeah, I have learned a lot, and I have a lot more to learn. So we should talk again after a year, and I can tell you what else I've learned. So I think if I was to talk to an entrepreneur, right, who's maybe starting out, doesn't matter what age, I think there are a few things I'd probably advise this person. The first one that the person already knows is that the most important thing is passion, right, as an entrepreneur. You cannot take the role of an entrepreneur. You cannot take the risks. You cannot take the ups and downs, because it's, as an entrepreneur, the highs are high, the lows are lows, right? If you're doing it for any other reason than passion for what you're doing, right? For that product, that service that they bring to the industry. So that passion is the most important thing. It's also important because what happens is it's not just you. Most startups, most companies are built with many people joining in, right? If you don't have that passion, that passion is what attracts other people, right? Mm-hmm. So in order to attract the right type of people, a group, a team that's going to make this thing take life, mm-hmm. your product idea take life, you need to have that passion, right? You need to use that as a way to get other like-minded, passionate people to go and build that. So passion is the most important thing. I think the other thing I'd advise and say, the whole idea of doing it outside in, right? Which is don't focus on the technology, right? And most technologies, as I mentioned earlier, they make the mistake. In my mind, it's a mistake, and it's not universal, that they get enamored with the technology and then they figure out where to apply it, mm-hmm. right? It's, in my mind, the best way it works is focus on if you were to build this, how would the world be different, right? And make sure you can articulate that carefully, the before and the after, right? And the before and after can never be based on features. Yeah. It's based on something bigger than that, right? So focus on that first. Focus on describing what you do in terms of its impact on people, on your users, on your consumers, on your customers. The other thing, and maybe you didn't want that many, but the other thing I'd say is the whole route to market. Again, a lot of entrepreneurs, and I one of them, have made the mistake of saying, if I build this, they'll come. It'll sell. How can anyone miss this wonderful thing that I'm building?
And this is not true.
Yeah. Well, maybe for some people it's true. I can tell you my experience. Maybe it's just me. It's challenging. So you need to think through. Even if this existed, how do people know about it? Mm-hmm. Right? How do you take it to market? And think that through, because sometimes that informs what you build, how you build it as well. Right? So I go back and say passion, which is sort of a personal attribute. The second one is focus on the what before you worry about the how. And the third one is focus on then how, not only how you build it, but how you take it to market, how people know about it. the whole route to market is really important.
Okay. Rajiv, I give you the extra one if you want to.
Sure.
Yeah, this Mahatma Gandhi thing. What was I can't remember, but there was some kind of quote.
Yeah. Actually, the quote I really like of Mahatma Gandhi. I'll go back to the question. I end up giving a lot of talks, and I've tried to, because I get bored myself, I try to find different approaches to give talks. One approach I've tried is for a talk of half an hour, I had 280 slides.
Wow.
So which is essentially, it's almost like a movie, right? Yeah. It's a slide with 5 words, 10 words, and you move on. It keeps people engaged, so that worked interestingly well. The other thing I try is that I give my talk based on quotes from interesting quotes to me, but typically from kind of famous people. So I quote Steve Jobs a lot, which is, I think he made a comment like, all I want to do is leave a mark in the cosmos, something like that, right? Yeah. So all he wants to do is leave a mark in the universe. Another one was no use asking customers, because by the time you did what they asked for, they'll have asked something else, or something, paraphrasing, something like that. I'll give you 2 quotes that I like, actually 3 quotes that I like a lot. One of them is from Calkin. Most people haven't heard of him, but what he said was, we don't know who discovered water, but we know it wasn't a fish. The interesting thing is, sometimes you're so close to something, you don't see it. You have to be far away enough to observe it. So I like that. The other one that I like is from Mother Teresa. Again, I'm going to screw up the quote. It's paraphrased. Some to the extent that all of us can't do big things, but all of us can do small things with love, right? Which is as an entrepreneur, you want to do big things, but that's what the idea is. But in terms of how you execute it, make sure everything you do it with passion and care and love. And the Mahatma Gandhi quote that I like is live like you will die tomorrow, but learn like you live forever, which I think is very interesting, which is live your life fully, because you never know how long you live, but take the time to learn, because that learning is going to help you for how long you do live. Great. Now, I'm not saying that the last one I've applied in my entrepreneurial world, in my entrepreneurial journey, but I'll have to think about that. Maybe I'll find a way to apply.
Great. Rajiv, thank you so much for sharing all this.
Sure, thank you.
And if you are currently starting a company or so, go for or with Mahatma Gandhi. Learn the whole way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.